Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a fantastic week. This week, I wanted to share a great conversation I had with Simon. Now, Simon teaches everyone how to increase the likelihood they're going to get presentations, make sure they're going to make money from their presentations, but also just get started with the concept of talking about what you do and what you love and why you're special at it. So thank you so much for coming back and giving me the time and the attention to consume this piece of content. I hope you take value from it, and I'll see you in just a moment.
So I am Simon. I started life as a researcher at Newcastle University, looking at the causes of childhood leukemia, really hard sums, and then I realized that scientists were really crap at explaining what they did. So I started researching how to make better presentations, and that is what I now teach people.
Thank you very much for the time, Simon. Much appreciated. And as we were discussing a little bit before the show, for me, I think it's really because my journey into presentation has been really interesting because I think some people would jump to mind, and they did when I said I was going to do it. Oh, you'll smash it. It'd be easy for you because I've done video for 10 years, right? So I've looked into a camera, I've done video content, I know what I'm doing when it comes to video. But we talked about a Venn diagram, and for those who don't know in regards to skill sets, how is there a different? Because there is different skills, right? I found there's a very different set of skills that comes from doing video. There is some crossover, sure, but the majority is actually very different. I'm sure we'll get into how, why, etc. But
as a crude rule of thumb, when you're live, there are fewer technical things to go wrong. Not no technical things to go wrong, but fewer technical things to go wrong. But there are more people-related things to go wrong because you're having much more of an interaction with people. Whereas I'm just throwing this down the wire at you, and if it goes wrong, we can always do it again. Nobody sees the outtakes and all of that kind of jazz. So there's almost no risk involved. And even if it was live, it doesn't feel like there is risk involved because the people who are going, oh my God, it's a moron, aren't actually in the same room as me. So it's not nearly so nerve-wracking.
But in presentation world, they are there. And they are even subconsciously, I think, in our own heads when we start giving a presentation. Like, so many people say to me, what if I get it wrong? Right? Now, the only asterisk I'll put on this is if it's a fact or a statement that is like, in the study found, right? Then you can get that wrong, right? Because that's a factual statement. Otherwise, I don't categorically believe
it can be ineffective, which is more important than whether or not it's right. So even if you are factually wrong, I'm not advocating this, by the way, but even if you are factually wrong, you can be effective as a presenter. And I'm going to use actually some negative examples. Donald Trump doesn't get a single thing right in damn well anything he says because he just doesn't care about reality at all. But he's quite an effective presenter. He gets people to vote for him.
But
yeah, so
I was going to say he's very entertaining.
He's got more lawyers than I have, so I'm not going to say Donald Trump is moronic because I might get sued. So I'm very clearly not saying that, just for the record. Okay. But the interesting thing you've mentioned there is that get it wrong, which brings us nicely to this idea that there are three different types of nerves for presenting. There's what I'm going to call logistical and technical nerves. What happens if the tech fails? What happens if my version of PowerPoint isn't the right version that they've got installed? What happens if I've not brought the right number of handouts? What happens if my car breaks down and I can't tell the meeting organizer or whatever? Then there are what are called performance nerves, which are those to do with talking to people in the room at the time. And that's where the what if I get it wrong and they laugh at me comes from. But then there's also the third type of nerve, which people always forget about, which I'm going to call consequence nerves. And those are the things where you're sticking your neck out in a presentation and saying, I believe you should be doing this and therefore that. And if you're sitting there not knowing what type of nerve it is that you're suffering from, you try using the wrong type of thought. So a silly, stupid example. Logistics nerves. I'm sure you've done this, you've done technical. You can get rid of logistics nerves almost completely just by having a simple checklist that goes, have I checked the mics or batteries? Have I checked my PowerPoint? Have I checked this? Have I checked that? Tick, 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 tick. And the logistics nerves go away. Yeah. As long as the answer to those questions is yes, then, if the answer to one of those questions is, oh shit, no, I've forgotten such and such, then you're screwed. But that gets rid of, and that's if that is a technique that is good enough for NASA's shuttle pilots when they were still flying making re-entry, if it is good enough for surgeons in the operating theatre, if it is good enough for Formula One pilots before then it's okay for us to use that technique as well. Let's not pretend that presentations are so simple that you don't need this kind of thing. A surgeon who's done 10,000 hours of surgery still has a freaking checklist, and they have it for a reason. And then that middle bit of the performance nerves, that's the one that everybody always thinks about, because that's the bit where you're exposed. You're at the front of the room and you feel like you are being judged, because from an evolutionary point of view, the worst thing your tribe could do was kill you. The second worst thing that your tribe could do was throw you out of the tribe, because that would eventually kill you. Yeah. Yeah. So being at the front of the room, outside and isolated from your tribe, is from an evolutionary point of view, it's bloody scary. And that's what the bit that everybody always freaks out about. But actually, it's not the bit that anybody cares about in the audience. Go on, yeah.
I mean, the example that jumps to mind to me was like when you do something witty that you think's witty and then it doesn't hit the audience, right?
Yeah.
And there's no laughter. It's this awkward silence, right? I'm sure you've had it. I've had it, etc. I mean, okay, quick in
Move on.
If that happens, what do you do?
That's it,
right? You quit. That's what I was going to say. You quickly go, right, okay. I think for me, there's two ways of fixing that problem. Either move on quickly, right, pretend it didn't happen, or take the piss out of yourself.
If it was blindingly obvious that you've tried something that hasn't worked, then just make a rest of it. Go, oh, all right, I'll not do that next time, and then move on. Yeah. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you for the feedback. Right, anyway, moving on.
A lot funnier in rehearsal when there was no audience around. And, thanks for the feedback, yes.
I can tell now, thanks. Right, anyway, moving on. Yeah.
But if they haven't noticed, then just get on with the job, because they don't know that there was a gag that you've mistimed.
And I think, before we get too far into like how, why, etc., really fundamentally, because we had a conversation very early on when we first met each other about like what's the return on investment in giving a presentation, right? Like I can sit here and I can say, oh, it's because it's a brand builder, it's good for credibility, it's good for positioning you as an expert, etc. But what would you say? Maybe it's some of the same, right? Because a lot of people, I think, don't do it. Number one, because they're terrified of the idea, they don't have the confidence to do it, etc. But also number two, they're like, well, what's the return on the time and the investment? It's a huge amount of investment of time and energy. Right?
Okay, so I'm going to be really cynical here and throw it back at you, or throw it back to them and go, instead of thinking of the cost of return on investment, ask yourself, what is the cost of not doing it? The cost of not doing it is that nothing changes, your career doesn't change, you don't progress, you don't make any sales, you're okay. So in terms of what we're going to call here opportunity cost, it's practically bloody infinite. So it's not a question of how much does, what's your return on investment. The real question is, how can I minimize the time in order to maximize the outcome? And there are lots of tips I can think of here. The main one is know what it is that you're trying to do. Because most people go into a presentation and they go, right, I'm going to give a presentation about X. Well, that's bloody pointless. That's like going into an advertising agency and saying, I want to make an advert about this cleaner. And they go, okay, so do you want sales, or do you want general awareness, or what? So if you go into a presentation just going, it's about the policy, that's not good enough. You want to go in there going, it is about the policy so that people change from the old child protection policy, for example, to the new child protection policy. And then you can measure ROI really easily by going, what percentage of my audience started to use the new child protection policy immediately after my gig, 2 weeks after my gig, 6 months after my gig? Well, if none of them did, then your ROI was pretty much zero and you failed. If all of them did, then your ROI was pretty much zero because it's perfect. There's no cost in that. But the other thing that people very, very often forget about is that there's a difference between rehearsing and practicing a presentation. This tosh that people go, practice makes perfect. I will put money on the fact that you're going to nod sagely as I say this. That's bollocks. What practice makes is permanent, which is the idea you need to...
Or improvement.
Well,
is another analogy I've heard.
Practice on its own doesn't even do that. Doing the same thing over and over just fixes something that was potentially wrong. That's permanently wrong. It's practice and feedback is the key thing. That's what makes the difference. And that's what rehearsal is. Rehearsal is do it, learn from it, do it differently. So what a lot of people do to minimize their ROI, professionals this is they go through their presentation once and go, most of it was fine. Minute 3 sucked, minute 19 sucked, minute 11 sucked. We don't go through the entire damned presentation over and over and over. You go, minute 3, what was wrong with it? Boom, you're at that. And you practice minute 3 over and over and over and over and over and over and over until you can't get minute 3 wrong. And then you don't rehearse the rest of it until you get to minute 11 or whatever it was. I forgot what silly numbers I just made up there. And you practice that over and over and over. Not only does that mean that your ROI and reinvestment is improved because you're now only rehearsing the bad bits, but it means that from the audience's point of view, it's an improvement because it doesn't sound rehearsed, because most of it is still fresh. And all kinds of really interesting, good things happen from that because you are not making it up on the spur of the moment, but improvising around the theme so you sound like you know what you're talking about comfortably, because nobody likes being presented to. If you take away nothing from this interview, nobody likes being presented to, everybody likes being chatted with. So if you're over-rehearsed, it's dead.
And that's I think the really important thing, and think that we both agree on when it comes to video and presenting and coming across in general, is have detailed targeted notes around these are the subjects I'm going to discuss. You should know them better or good enough to be able to teach them without having to look at the notes. Because if you don't teach them, right? Now, arguably, the way to get really, really, really good on a topic is teaching it to someone else, right? But you have to be at a certain level to be good enough to do that. And the thing is, and it's interesting because for the second business, we discussed this, like, we're not going to create any content about stuff we don't actually 100% know and we can't do off the fly. And that's not because we haven't prepped it and haven't practiced it and haven't done notes on it. It's the fact that we know those notes so well, I don't need to look at my video workshop related notes. They exist. They're in a notebook over there. I don't need to. It's the same when you create a PowerPoint, right? Like, I personally choose not to use PowerPoints. The PowerPoints exist. It's not that I haven't created them. I just choose not to use them because my style, especially because we're going to be filming them, which different conversation entirely, brings in a challenge to, like, where do I want the attention of the audience to be? Do I want it to be on me or do I want it to be on the PowerPoint? And I think the thing that some people think when I say that is I'm saying, oh, I don't prep your presentations, don't take notes, don't do it. It's not what I'm saying at all. Do it, create it,
right. So
and
there's
then
a great
choose
and I
the context
think
in
it
which
is Charlie
you use
Parker,
it.
but no doubt the moment you release this podcast, I will remember exactly who it was and someone will correct us. I think it was Charlie Parker said, master your instrument, master the music, then forget all that shit and just play. And that's where you should be on stage or in front of the camera. You should know your technology, that's the music. You should know your content, that's the instrument. And then you should know them so well you don't need to be worrying about the damn things. It should just, it should just happen, or at least it should look like it's just happening. That's the key thing.
And it's the same when it comes to, like, traditional rules regarding filmmaking and photography, right? Like rule of thirds, lighting, framing, so on, right? You need to understand the rules so then you can break them, right? That doesn't mean break them all the time. You break in them for a reason, right? Because there's reasons why those rules exist. The same in presenting, etc. But so now people are maybe in a position where they're like, okay, Simon, I want to do some presentation, I want to do this, etc. I mean, how would you say people get the opportunity to actually give a presentation, right? Because I think the main challenge isn't I have a topic I can talk about for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever, right? Cool. It's actually, how do I get to the position where I can be, I'm the person on the stage.
Okay.
I'm the person in the front of the room. I'm the person.
Here's a silly question. Have you ever been to a networking meeting of any kind and watched somebody else do something from the front of the room? So I've seen videos of you talking at the front of the room. How did you get from the seat to the front of the room? Because that's the way that everybody does it. You go to these meetings, you sit down, you go, okay, so in order to do this, what they need is 10 minutes. They need it, let's say, without slides. They need it on this sort of topic. And then you find out who it is you need to be talking to, and Bob's your proverbial uncle. And it may very well be that your first couple of gigs are disasters, or it may well be that you don't get through the end without croaking or whatever.
They probably are going to be, by the way, just for the record. Probably are.
Well, here's the pro tip. when you're doing that, when you're learning your craft, don't take the status quo advice, which is go to places where everybody is your friend. Don't want to do that at all, because your first ones are going to screw up. You want to go to the place where nobody knows who the freaking hell you are, so that as, when, and if you crash and burn, you leave the meeting and you
never need to see these people ever again.
Exactly. You have yourself a pint of whatever, or a glass of wine. You do a bit of reflective practice, going, okay, so that sucked. How do I make it less suck less? And then you go, So the very first gigs but even I've been doing this for 20 odd years now, and that I will never, ever take a new gig on stage in front of my target audience. It makes it more likely it's going to bomb, because the first time I take it on stage, I know it is for the wrong kind of people, because I'm taking it somewhere where it doesn't matter that it's going to completely bomb. But that gives me an enormous amount of confidence that I've rehearsed this material and Bob's your proverbial uncle. But basically, it is about do it, get counsel, play with it, do it again. And I'm definitely using the word counsel there, not feedback. Because any old moron, I nearly swore really badly there, any old moron can give you feedback. The taxi driver I took to my last gig could tell me exactly what Gareth Southgate was doing wrong. He could go to Gareth Southgate and give him feedback. What's the quality of that feedback? What are the chances of your taxi driver knowing what the hell they are talking about? So get counsel from, you don't get legal advice from matey Jim down the pub. You go to a lawyer. The same principle applies here.
Yeah. And also I think it's about, to an extent, and I'd be curious to hear your feedback on this, and something that I've followed for a long time is take counsel from people who know what they're talking about, but also take what they're saying with a grain of salt, because if it's not going to be authentic to you, right? So I remember the conversation that we had about my first presentation. You were like, I think it was something along the lines of wearing a hat, right? And how that was challenging with lighting and such. And I completely understand that, because I did, because video and such. But the reason why is because it's a key part of the brand. Therefore, I vetoed that part of the. I didn't disregard everything. I said that part. Okay, I get it, but also gonna veto it because it's not as relevant. It's not. No, it was still relevant, and it was still good to know and have a reminder of. But it wasn't something that I was necessarily going to take on board, because it didn't. There was things that meant the reasons why it was vetoed was more important than that specific challenge issue. How do people, I guess in some ways, have the confidence to do that, but also in some ways, how do they know where the veto part
no, that's tricky, because
is the crux?
What makes me different from most presentation trainers is the answer to this question. Because most presentation trainers do the whole warm and fluffy, lovely, and just life is too short for that, right? I'm a research scientist. What I have done is spend time researching how to structure your presentation, for example. Put this in front of this, follow it with this, and you've got an 85% chance of it working. If it doesn't work, do this instead. And if it doesn't work after that, you're screwed. But you get it. And everything I would tell people in the training course is true in the same sense as men are taller than women. You've never met my wife, but all the other things being equal, I'm 6 foot tall. What do you reckon? Is she going to be taller than me, or no? She's going to be shorter than me, right? Probably shorter than me. She's 5'2", right? So she's a lot smaller than me. Doesn't mean she's less scary. It's just worth pointing that out, but she's bloody terrifying. But statistically, that she's going to be shorter than me. So what you're playing with here is statistically, I should be doing this. And you need to have or that or the other, and you need to have a bloody good reason for vetoing it, not this makes me feel uncomfortable. So if it's just a vague sort of, no, I don't want to do that, I've got no time for that. If it's something like when you've got, I can give you a really clearly articulated good reason for it, then by all means, you are the equivalent of a short man meeting a tall woman. There are exceptions to every, I don't know how to.
Yeah, but there's an exception to every rule, right? It is the crux. And the reason why I bring up that question is because some people, I think, are, and just for the record, you should never do this at the beginning, right? At the beginning, you don't know shit Own the fact you don't know shit, right? That's cool, that's good, that's the point of progression, that's the point of growth. However, when you get to a position where you have specific brand things or specific things that you wear or specific things that you have that asterisks, yeah, ideally it fucks up lighting, etc., creates weird shadows, etc., 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 which is what we're discussing with the hat. But there's also then you need to make a really analysis-based like balancing act, which is option A, I'm on brand and it fits into everything else. Option B, I have perfect lighting on my face.
Honestly, yeah, and to be honest, once you've got your lighting sorted out, you don't have any shadows on any part of your face today that matter. You know, your forehead's in shadow. Who cares? I can still see the important bits. It's your beard that's the problem now, man. That's the.
And I mean, ironically, right, lighting is something you'll always tweak and change, but these are all fluffs added onto the content, right? Like, let's just make it very clear for the content's sake. Everything we're discussing, camera quality. The only exception here is audio quality, and I'll get onto that in a second. But everything else, framing, lighting, whether it's moving, whether it's not moving, whether it's got multi-cameras, blah, 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 whatever, that's all fluff. If you're talking shit, it doesn't matter, right? The only time I'll say asterisks is like audio quality, because if I can't hear you and it's not like clear and it's not like actually nice and
then it doesn't matter whether you're talking shit because no one can hear whether you're talking shit. Yeah, everything falls apart at that point. Yeah,
and it should be an enjoyable experience to consume the content.
Yeah, okay. So we call those hygiene factors. Hygiene factors are those things which, if you fuck them up, your presentation is going to fall apart, no matter how good everything else is. And the analogy we talk about here is if you want to make a car go faster, think of hygiene factors as the number of wheels it's got. With one wheel, it's going nowhere. 2 wheels, it's going nowhere. 3 wheels, it's going nowhere. 4 wheels, now it can move somewhere. And now, instead of giving it a 5th wheel, stop farting about with your hygiene factors and give it a bigger engine. But there's no point in giving it a bigger engine. There's no point in fire eating on stage if your hygiene factors are. So, for example, one of my big gigs, I finished playing the cajon, the Peruvian box drum. And it's a great way to get standing ovation, by the way, because it's a dirty trick. You just get the audience to clap along with the drumming that you're doing, and it looks like a standing ovation. But so there's no point in doing that until and unless I've got all my basics absolutely nailed. Absolutely nailed. You'd be amazed, by the way, at how dumb audiences are sometimes, he says with his tongue in his cheek. So there's one gig we've done where I pretended that somebody had bullied me into playing the con. Because I was teaching people presentation nerves control techniques. And the idea is that they came on stage at the end and went, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just interrupting Simon's presentation because if his techniques work, he should be able to do something just like that out of his comfort zone. Simon, I happen to know you've had 6 half-hour lessons on the cajon, and I happen to have a cajon. I demand that you play the cajon in front of the audience. And of course, the audience lap it up because they want to see me humiliated. But what worries me is that audiences genuinely seems to think that gig centres, venues, whatever, happen to have a Peruvian box drum stashed away in this, and it never occurs to them the whole thing's a setup. Kind of frightening, really, isn't it?
But yes and no. I mean, it's funny because I was at the time recording anyway. I just filmed the wedding fair yesterday, and they had these ladies who were like conveniently placed wearing wedding dresses walking around the fair. It was like, I'm like, how much did they pay them? Right? In my head. Everyone else was like, wow, that's convenient. Wow. Right? But this is the smoke and mirrors, because we're in the industry, because of the play, because of the interplay, etc. We know what the smoke and mirrors is going to be. We know how you run these events. We know how to create engaging content, engaging presentations, entertainment, etc. Because the level of every presentation, whether it's highly educational or lowly educational, has to be entertaining. Otherwise, you're not going to look at it. You're not going to enjoy it.
It has to be engaging, at least. Not necessarily entertaining, but engaging.
But it's in a form of, I'm holding your attention for a reason. Exactly. I'm going to exchange it for, you give me attention, I give you value in exchange, right? Now, the value is the bit where it gets subjective because that's down to the audience, it's down to what you're teaching, etc., etc. But the crux is, what is the value add I'm giving to my audience when I create piece of content like this, or give a presentation, or create a video, etc.? And it's funny because so many people ask me, how do you get views? How do you get this? How do you get that? What? And I'm like, the question I always answer, it always throws them off a bit, is like, why do you care about that metric, right? Why is that the thing you're focusing on, right? Because Yes, it's important. Yes, it's a metric you should look at. Yes, it's a metric you should analyze. But if that's the thing you're focusing on, you're missing the point.
It's a consequence
Because
metric,
the point,
not an input metric. Yeah.
yeah, it's how can I get better for the sake of me getting better, not so I can get more attention, views, likes,
or at the very least, how do I get better so I can help more people more of the time? And if you do that, then your views will go up. But if what you're trying to do is to get your views up in the first place, you're kind of cart before horse. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, attention comes when you add extraordinary amount of value in a very short period of time. That's why views come in a crux. If you want the blueprint, there's the blueprint. The problem that comes is people don't understand what is valuable and what isn't, and I don't, and Simon doesn't either. That's why we create the stuff and put it out in the world, so we can gauge the understanding and gauge the audience reaction, whether that's in person, physically giving a presentation, or recording it, which is a separate conversation entirely about scaling your presentations, which is great and fantastic, or creating video content.
So I'm half with you there. You said you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Sometimes we know
at the beginning
Yeah.
you don't, right? That was the context I
Yeah.
didn't give. But at the beginning, when you start, you've got no idea. So the only way to start is put a load of stuff out there and see what happens.
And then look very carefully and very quickly at what's working and what's helpful and what's not working. That's the bit that people forget. It's the bit I forget, you know? I've had a series called Talk Tuesday going out every week now for over a year. It's helpful. It's lovely. People tell me it's fantastic. And I'm kind of going, oh, hang on a second. I need to do something with that because my return on investment is quite low because I'm just giving away free content and I'm not monetizing it in any way, shape or form whatsoever. I'm getting zero ROI because I have no idea why I've not thought about it.
Well, I would argue you're not, because you're positioning yourself, because this is the thing that some people misunderstand when they give content out for free. Do you have a direct payment model attached to that content? No. Do you have brand builder, reputation, and potentially referrals and all of that, and marketing? Absolutely. So actually, there's
potential indirect ROI.
Is it direct? Can I track it? And is it high in regards to revenue?
The point I was trying to get was
that doesn't make it.
Yeah. What I should do is go back over those and go, these are the ones that more people found more useful, and I should do more of those rather than the ones that fewer people have found useful. The frustrating thing about that, and I think we're both going to hold our hands up and bang our heads on the wall here, is that sometimes what people find useful and what people should find useful are not necessarily the same thing. So what they would need and what they think they want don't overlap on a Venn diagram. They're kind of, they're over here.
Building on the point you just mentioned, I think it's about removing your emotional attachment to, oh my God, this video, this presentation, this part is going to be really valuable. Because it's not up to you. It's up to the audience. It's not down to me to what reel gets 8,300 views or 1,000 views or 300 views or 200 views or 2.
That is true, right? But it is also true. What is up to you is how much useful content you put in that video in the first place, which is what's likely to partially lead to the 8,000 views, yes.
Yes, absolutely. You can, but the thing is, especially when people start out, you have to start that ball rolling, so then you've got data to then analyze, to then optimize, right? The thing that I think most people find difficult is taking that first step, because the problem that comes with that is the self-concern, the self-esteem issue, the, oh my God, going back to that fight or flight, oh my God, I'm in front of the tribe, having to have a conversation-esque piece from a psychology point of view. People don't do it because we're scared of it. People don't do it because that's out of a comfort zone, right? And by proxy, we want to be comfortable because we're more likely to survive if we're comfortable. That's where it comes from, right? From a psychology point of view. When someone is like, so we mentioned a little bit earlier about like networking groups and etc. They're great places to start, and that's how I know every single speaker starts, right? Every single opportunity comes from conversation, etc. How, in your experience, have people found, like, because there's a jump, right, where you go from, okay, I'm speaking at networking, cool, networking group, and now I'm on a stage. Now I'm in a bigger room. Now I'm in front where I've been invited as a keynote speaker. I'm positioned as a speaker. I'm seen as an expert, etc. What would you say are the factors that really help bridge that gap? Because a lot of the audience that are probably going to consume this will be able to get quite a lot through the networks. We know opportunities to speak about what they do to a closed-esque or small, medium-sized to small audience. I think what people, and myself included, would love to do more of is, I've got 1,000 people I can talk to. I've got 10,000 people I talk to. For a status and a I'm a pure expert, maybe, but also in a position where it's, I'm actually really good at what I'm talking about, and here's the proof about why.
So all kinds of things to say to that. The one, I want to get this out of the way, because this is not the answer that you're expecting, but I want to get out of the way. Don't forget that small audiences are sometimes better than big audiences, because if it's 10,000 people who don't give a monkeys, that's different from 10 people who are going to take what you do and go, oh my God, that is world changing for me. And the knock-on consequences of that are just freaking astonishing. And I can tell you from personal experience that some of the biggest, most impactful gigs I have given have been to no more than 20 people. Some of the least impactful gigs I have given have been to thousands of people, because I was just a performing monkey that they had brought in to get. Okay, so don't panic in small rooms. Yeah, I can peel bananas with my feet and all sorts of interesting things, and it's a less big of a leap than you think it is, because what tends to happen is that you're talking in rooms of 12 people, rooms of 20 people. And then word gets out that you can hold the room, and you start talking in rooms of 40 people. And from 40 people, it is a small step to breakout rooms at conferences. And from breakout rooms at conferences, it is a smaller-ish step to main stage in conferences. So if you don't think of it as a step, you think of as a series of smaller steps, if you see what I mean. And the bit that always disappoints people is that it is very, very rare for people to be looking for you. What they're looking for is content, and therefore you have to draw their attention to you. So, for example, I've got a whole package which I know is blindingly useful for people who are in really high-pressure situations. Lawyers, for example, if you're in a court of law, you need to have your wits about you. So the tools I've got for making presentations would be really useful for them. Are they sitting there thinking, what would be useful for me? What would be useful for me is being able to blah, blah, blah. I know what I'll do. I'll phone Simon. That doesn't happen. So you need to go on the front foot. You need to go on the offensive in the technical sense of the word. And you need to start looking for the opportunities, because they will not ever come to you. And that means you have to swallow your pride, and God, I hate it. You have to swallow your pride, and your first slide or your last slides or something has to have a link, a QR code to your LinkedIn profile or something, so that now the technique I use is to give people the big ideas from the stage, and then say, what I've told you is the why and the what. If you want the how, you can download it from presentationgenius.info/something.pdf. And in that PDF is all the technical stuff that they will ever need. I don't charge for this. I don't even take their email addresses for this. It just tells them the how they should do it. And inside that free PDF that I give everybody, the last page is, and by the way, would you like to give me some money doing this, 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 and this? So it's always about giving value first, and then looking for ways to offer that value to more and more people.
I think this is where content scaling is really important, but also just building before we go into content scaling. And like, for me, this is what I'm telling to a lot of business owners that I'm coaching, but a lot of business owners I talk to on a regular basis. It's like, there's kind of two camps right now, especially look at the economy and the way it is. It's like, are you in a proactive state of, right, there is an opportunity here. I'm going to strive for that opportunity. I'm going to leverage my network. I'm going to leverage the connections. I'm going to leverage the content, whatever it may be, that I have access to build myself more opportunities. Or am I going to sit here and wait for my emails to increase to come through my email?
They never do.
Or my phone to ring.
Bitter experience, they never do. But there's another distinction I want to make here, which is there are two ways of getting paid for your gig. There is the getting paid to turn up, or there is the turning up, delivering your gig, and work coming in off the back of it. So you might want to consider your presentation not as an end in itself, but as a mean. It's like getting paid to do your marketing. Even if somebody only pays me, I don't know, a couple of grand for a gig, that barely covers my prep time and my travel time and my hotel and all of that kind of jazz. In fact, sometimes it doesn't even. But what it might lead to, if I'm really good and there's a good match between me and the audience, is 3 more gigs or a request to come and do some in-house work. Because most of my work is in-house. That's the kind of people, Dell Computers comes to me and says, would you do us this? They don't say, come to the big conference and do that. They say, would you come in-house and do it in a private room? And at that point, you go, you know what? No, I don't want to work for Dell Computers. Damn it, you've got too much money. I'm not going to take any of that off you. Oh, no, sorry. No, that's not what happens. What you do is you go, yes, yes, yes. So there's an ROI here on not just do you get paid, but what even do the non-paid gigs lead to, if you see what I mean. But an interesting toy that we play with is, that checklist we talked about at the beginning of the session, what we call our ties and flies list, is the last thing that Claire checks before I go on stage for a big gig. I've never yet done it, by the way, but it makes me giggle which means that when I go on stage, I'm smiling generally to myself at this idea. But we have 3 of those lists. One is before the day, so that's travel arrangements, phone numbers, all that, numbers of people, target audience. There's the on the day, which is batteries in your microphone, yada, yada, yada. And then there is the after the day, which is, have I packed all the cables that I came with? Have I given my business card to so-and-so? And have I done a reflective practice on this thing? And that follow-up list would be, have I made LinkedIn contact with the 3 people who came to ask me a question at the end of the gig, or whatever it happens to be. But it's always about you treating the gig, as the actual presentation itself, as part of a process. That's how you scale it. You treat it as part of a process, not as a... But while we're at it, while we're talking about scaling, and this overlaps with your area of expertise, there is a couple of things to think about videoing with your gig as well. Because if you video your gig, yes, you can get that out in lots of people. You can send them the video and go, look, this is how good I am. The problem with that is that what that shows them is how good you are at that type of gig. So if I am videoed in front of 12 people, what that tells somebody else is that I can hold a room of 12 people. And because most people have got the imagination and capacity to think of your average dead squat ant, what they then go is, oh, right, if I've got what I need for 12 people, I'll phone Simon. So you'd be really careful with your show reel, as we call it, your recordings of your gigs, and show as many different styles, even if you only show 5 seconds of something. So it's 3 seconds of this room, 5 seconds of that room, 2 seconds of the other room, to prove you've been in lots of places, lots of circumstances, lots of gigs. If it's a small room, for the love of God, only show them the close-up of your face and make sure the microphone catches everybody laughing, so that you don't show a room of 25 people in it with 32 empty chairs. Because that, on the other hand, if you've got a room of 32 people and standing room at the back, then you make sure the video camera pans around to show the audience with standing room only at the back. So the video stuff there has to be quite well. Why am I telling you this? You know this better than I do.
It's correct, but it's also, I think, the reason why you have a much variation is it can show that you've actually practiced, right? You're not just, hey, I stood up once and gave a talk, right? So and I think that
it's why I don't use my TEDx as a marketing tool, particularly. I take excerpts of my TEDx, but if I just show my TEDx, people go, oh, right, he's done that. But I've got dozens of things, yeah.
And I think so, the thing that people ask me all the time is, why do you film every talk you do, etc., no matter the size of room, etc.? Because I'm trying to scale the content I'm delivering. To be honest with you, don't really mind if anyone hopefully they do take value, hopefully it does become something, but that's not my key reason for doing it. My key reason for doing it is so I've got distribution content for the foreseeable future. That's the reason why I'm doing it, because that will serve me for the foreseeable future, because I'm putting it on the internet where it can grow and scale my brand, my business, who I am and what I do, larger than any other platform until I get to the point where I'm in front of like a stage talking at a conference. But even then, me filming that also helps me then distribute that to greater than the audience, right? So because it's online forever, so you'll invest that time, that energy, that resource, that money, etc. But then have assets you can use for the foreseeable future, whether that's getting more talks like
Yeah.
that.
As long as it's a policy
or-
decision to do that, a strategic policy decision is what I'm getting at. Yeah, that's the point I'm making. Think it through and decide what the hell it is you want to do, and then customize your video appropriately so that it's either going to scale or not scale or whatever the hell it is you want to do. Yeah. But if you want to be on the big stages, you need to show that you have been on the big stages, or fake it, or whatever. Yeah.
But also, I think it gives you an extremely valuable resource for you just as a presentation, even if you don't post it, right? Because the first couple, I chose to post because I wanted to show my progression from point A to point B. That was a strategic decision that I made, right? However, people who are very self-conscious or don't want to necessarily show those first bits or the rehearsals, who don't have a hell of a level of self-esteem, self-worth, self-value, self-confidence, maybe it's better to actually record those, maybe it's on your phone, etc., so you can go back and critique it, so you can go back and see how you came across. Why did you move your hands? Why did you move? One of the things we had a conversation about when I first started giving presentations was, why are you moving so much? Right? What are you doing? You're running around like a headless chicken. And then I went, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I get why. Okay, now let's stop moving. Let's move with intent instead of just moving, right? For the sake of it, right? Am I making a point that's specific needed? And I'm someone who talks with the hands a lot, right? So when I move and when I'm talking with my hands, why am I talking with my hands? How does that help actually increase the likelihood that the person consuming the content or in the room is going to be more likely to understand what I'm saying?
So
and actually take value
in the circumstances we're in now, where I'm talking to you down a Zoom link, the gesticulation you're making is making you much more personable and much easier to relate to as an individual. Whereas if I'm just talking to a robot with a talking head like this, it is really boring to talk. I look like Max. What's that? I'm showing my age now. Max, the talking head faker. Yeah, that's how old I am. Max Headroom. Just Google it, folks. Just go and look for Max Headroom. How old is Simon Raybould? That's yeah.
But I think as well as a starting point, it will naturally build your confidence, because I'm just used, like, it's just not like when you do what I do, especially, people just assume I'm going to film what I do, so they're not heartbroken if they miss my presentation because they'll see the redistribution of the presentation, right? They just that's the assumption they come to, right? Now, if I stopped doing that, they would be like, what? Because I've built a reputation around, I give a presentation and it will be distributed after the fact. There will be a documentation of that presentation. I have released some of the full presentations, but again, that's strategic about why, right? Normally it's, hey, here's an idea of what a full workshop can look like if this is something you would be interested in having a conversation with me about.
Brackets, give me the money for the full thing, close brackets. Yeah,
pretty much. And in Crux, this is how I can articulate it, and but also it's a way for me to test how the market is as well, right? Like when you're building a new talk, some of the time you actually want to do stuff that's a bit raw and a bit around there because you want to gain that constructive criticism from your own audience.
Funny you should say that. Literally, the last gig I have done was for the Professional Speaking Association, a showcase which is intended to be for new speakers. I'm not a new speaker, every one of these grey hairs is hard fought for, but I used it as an excuse to try out new content, as you say. And I was talking, I literally asked for feedback. Does the idea of this have legs? It's rubbish. I know it's rubbish because it's the first time it's been out. I've barely even rehearsed it, but I'm not going to invest 60 or 70 hours in making it the perfect 20-minute presentation if it's not of interest to anybody. Does it have legs? So you try it out when it's raw. That's painful. That is really painful.
But it's also a really good analogy to when you're starting with video ideas, when you're starting with presentation ideas. Just get in the habit of just execution and then worry about prettyifying it and making it look good and making it sound good.
Done is better than perfect.
All these upgrades bit, right, down the line, right? Like this podcast is a key example. I need to do audio-based content. Okay. So in 2020, I started audio-based content. I didn't worry about how I started the first episode as a solo episode and I polled my audience to get questions because I was like, I don't know if I want a guest. I don't even know if I'm even going to do this beyond episode 2. So it's like, I'm just going to try it, see if I enjoy it, firstly. Secondly, is there value in doing it? Surprise, we're episode 107, 109, something like that. So yes, there is value in doing it, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Well, it's popular. That's not necessarily the same as value, but I'm just taking the piss just because it's fun. So yeah, popularity is the only measure we've got, but it's not a guarantee of usefulness. Just look at how many people watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. How much use is...
Again, yeah, again, and this is the conversation I have all the time with clients. It's like, you can have 10, I can get you 10,000 views. Are they the right 10,000 views? That's the question. And the more important factor actually is it the right 5 people, 10 people, 15 people that are actually going to have a meaningful connection with you and then actually make a purchasing decision because of that piece of content, because of the consistency you have with your content, because they saw you in front of a room, because etc, etc, etc. And it kind of comes back to that conversation around the strategic reasoning behind why you're doing a presentation as a whole. The sales reality is it's difficult. It's difficult now. It's difficult when it was boom. It was difficult in general, right? We're all competing for, in some ways, the same. I don't never believe
the same sort of thing.
But
Yeah,
the same kind of work, right? The thing is that you need to appreciate is you're going to do it specifically differently. You're going to do it your way, and that's going to resonate with the right people for you. Right, so for me, that's why it was interesting when we did the feedback bit. I was like, yeah, I get what you mean by the hat thing, but the hat thing for me is a brand thing, so it vetoes it, right? I mean, for people who have really enjoyed the conversation and really want to connect with you, hear more about the training, hear more of your stuff, hear a lot more about actually how to get really efficient and really good at articulating what they already know really well. Where's best for people to reach out? Where's people to have that conversation? Where can they continue this conversation?
Easiest place to start off to get a feel for it is presentationgenius.info, and then look at the blog, because that will give you a feel for my style. But if you want to contact me, the best way of doing it is on LinkedIn, Simon-Raybould-presentations. Raybould is Raybould, and the reason the hyphen presentations bit is on the end is because there are 2 Simon Rayboulds on LinkedIn, and one of them is a baker from Canada. Lovely chap. I'm sure he makes great bread. But the worrying thing is that somebody had a conversation with me a while back, and it wasn't thinking I was him. And because bread baking is a hobby of mine, it wasn't until they said, and how many dozen loaves a day do you make? I kind of went, say what?
So I see the problem.
Yes, so basically, check out the link. But yeah, it's either the website for the blog or LinkedIn for video content and getting to know me a little bit more personally.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the time, Simon. And a final takeaway, final point, final value that I can grab from you.
Okay,
what would you say?
It's not about you. It's always about the content. Nobody cares. Nobody comes to see me. Nobody goes, oh, I'm going to that gig because Simon's giving it. That would be nice, wouldn't it? They come to the gig because they've read the blurb and they go, I want to know that. And then the fact that it's me giving it means that instead of being on the fence and going, shall I, shan't I, it's a cold Friday night and I'm busy, they decide to go because it's me. But the initial stuff is all about the content.
Thank you so much. Never mind. Thank you so much, ladies and gents, for coming back and joining me once again. I hope you took value from that conversation with myself and Simon. And if you did, and you don't want to miss next week's episode, where we'll be talking to someone else about a new exciting topic, it's going to be great. Make sure to be subscribed. I'll see you very soon. Thank you very much for the time. Take care.